Hey y'all, how y'all doing? So I thought I'd come on here for a few minutes and talk and a little bit about who I am and what I do. As you can see, this is a wig and that's my specialty. My name is Roxanne, aka Jelena, and I am what's called a wig builder. Um, I wanted to just give you guys some information about this process and how I became a wig builder. So what I'm doing right now is called ventilation. It's called tying a knot. And in order to even get past the door in this field, you need to learn how to tie a knot. So here is my story behind how I became a wig builder for television, Broadway, and film. It sounds glamorous, but it's not. First of all, this wig that I'm doing is a custom wig that I'm doing for a client. And that client, she has challenges with her hairline not being there full the way it could be. And so she enlisted me to do a custom unit for her. Now, mind you, this is a huge business. Wigs is a big deal. It's gone so big. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I'm just a little small pea in the pod. In the ocean, should I say. I'm just like a little small dot in the ocean. But here's my story. So, I first was a hairstylist, right? So I started in the beauty industry many years ago, long before lace wigs, long before a lot of things that are well known in today's beauty industry. And I went to beauty school when I was a teenager. Been in the business over 40 years. But in those 40 years, I gained a lot of experience in many fields, not just knowing how to make wigs that graces the stages of Broadway and in front of big film productions. I started out as just a regular hairstylist in Harlem, where I grew up. And I always was ambitious. I always desired to have this salon. I always wanted to have a salon. But I was really good at doing hair naturally as a teenager. So, you know, it didn't surprise me that I went to beauty school. And that beauty school was Wilford Academy in Manhattan. They don't exist anymore. But I believe they was on 51st Street and Broadway. It's been such a while since I went to beauty school. But anyway, back then, it's still the same. I think in New York, in order to get your Cosmo, some states is more hours you got to do, but in New York, it's only 1,000 hours. In New Jersey, it's 1,200. But anyway, I started out in New York, and I still am in New York to a certain extent, because when I make wigs for Broadway, you know, it's in New York City. So I started out as just a regular hairstylist. Back then, we were doing perms. We didn't know nothing about weaves. In fact, weaves were just really worn by, you know, well-to-do, high-sedity women who had money, or women that were in the film and wig. I'm sorry, film and television and music industry, and they were like horrific looking. Those wigs back then were really not that great. Back when I started, but they have evolved so much. But I've always been ambitious. I've always had a desire to grow. I didn't want to just be a behind the chair stylist. I always wanted to know what was a cutting edge, and these hairs are pretty thick. I gotta make sure these knots are tight. I always wanted to be on the I always wanted to be on the cutting edge of what was new and what was hot and what was happening for the time. And I did. Whatever came out, I knew it. I was always the one that they come to. Ooh, did you hear about the new this, the new that? And I was like, yep, I got it. I'm ready. I can do it for you. That was me as a young beautician. I never, ever had to chase clients. Clients would always find me. However, I did learn how to market. And once I put something on the market, at that time we were using newspaper ads. We didn't have the internet. There was no such thing as the internet back then. So we would put an ad in the newspaper, and because I lived in Harlem, I put the ad in the Amsterdam News, a big old picture of me displaying a new technique that I learned how to do. And that technique, I learned how to do it back in 1980, 1988, 1989. It was called the interlock. It became a big deal, just like how lace front wigs became a big deal. The interlock was a big deal in the late 80s and early 90s, mid 90s. And I found a woman who, everybody was talking about. She knew how to do these interlocks. And so I went to her, and I got my interlock done. And I remember we went out for that evening, went to the club, and we partied, and our hair was beautiful and flowing. And at the time, she was a gatekeeper. She didn't want to show me nothing. She wanted to be the one. It was maybe her and maybe 3 other people in New York City doing them. And I wanted to learn how to do them too. So I found a girl in the Bronx. I started working at her salon, and she was doing them. She taught me how to do them. And why did that happen? Oh my God. I went out on my own, and it was over. I remember I had so many customers because I knew how to advertise. I would put an ad in the Amsterdam News, that big old picture of me wearing an interlock. I wish I could find that picture. I would show it. Wearing an interlock, and it was beautiful. I was young in my 20s. Wearing this interlock. So then I went on to, weaves became very popular, and braids. And not as much braids as much as weaves. Weaves became very popular. And I learned how to do weaves. I learned how to do flat weaves. Whatever became popular at the time, I knew it. And so I went on to become a really good weavologist. I should say weavologist. And everyone was coming to me to get weaves. Everybody was coming to me to get the interlock. And the interlock technique that I was doing back then, it was only a handful of us in New York City who had it on lock, and I was one of them. And that same technique of interlock, in today's market, they call it tree braiding. But back then, it was called interlocking. And tree braiding became very popular. It seemed like things evolve as time go by. Either sometimes it disappears and then it comes back. Well, that's what happened with tree braiding. Tree braiding was interlocking was really big back then. And then it died down a little bit when the weaves came out, and then it came back. So right now it's called tree braiding, but back then it was interlocking. And I developed my own technique of interlocking, and where I would go get hair from Lugos or Adorables. Many of you who was around at that time, y'all know exactly who I'm talking about. And they were the top dog hair people in New York City, where you get this good quality hair. And I would get 8 ounces of hair, And back then it was only $70, I think, 8 ounces of hair. And you would go and sit there and you would wait for them to rake out that hair for you, and you come back and you do your clients. And I was charging $350. That's what I paid to get interlocking from that time, between $350 and $400. And I was just like kicking butt. Everybody was coming to me to get their interlock. You know, there was other people doing them too, but I was one of the top interlock stylists in New York City. So so then, like I said, the weaves came out, and then I started doing a lot of weaves. And I was always one who wanted to learn something new. Whatever was on the cutting edge, that was me. I wanted to learn it. So fast forward, now mind you, I'm still not doing wigs. I'm just doing interlocking and weaves. But then the fusion came out, and the fusion became a big deal. And so all of these major companies like Great Lengths, Hair Dreams, you name it, they were all out doing these, selling these high-end hair extensions, which we called them the fusions. And there were many different names, but they were the fusion back then. In today's market, they're called the K-tips. And everybody's back on the fusion bandwagon again, but you know, they renamed it, they relabeled it K-tips. And because there's so many different textures of hair now, they look really beautiful. Back then, we had Indian hair, but now they got hair from all over the world. You know, they source hair from all over the world, and then they make these K-tips. I used to make mine too. I would get the adhesive, I would get the glue gun, and back then we used to get the glue sticks and melt them bad boys and make it. And I would make all of my K-tips prior to the customer coming. And back then I was only charging anywhere between $700 and $1,000 to do the fusions my way, you know. But if it was the Great Lengths ones, the Great Lengths was like $1,500, $2,000. Even back then, they were very expensive. People were paying $2,000 or $3,000 for hair extensions back then. And that was when, let me see, that was in 2006, 2007. Yeah. I had people, at the time I didn't have a salon. People were coming to my house. They were, or either I would go to them, and I was busting them out. But then, once again, like I said, I'm one of those stylists that always wanted to be on the cutting edge of what's new and what's hot. And so I found out about the microchet extensions, and I flew to Chicago. This was in 2006, I believe. I flew to Chicago. 2005. I flew to Chicago. There were two things that I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn how to do the microchet extensions, and that was a big deal, right? And at the same time that the microchet extensions came out, I renamed them called the Invisible Strands hair extensions, right? And my teacher, we're still friends to this day. I met her, and she lived in California, and I met her in Chicago. It was me and 3 other women that paid her $1,700 for her to teach us how to do it. I flew into Chicago, stayed there overnight, and got my certificate to learn how to do these microchet extensions. And then I came back, and I made my money back that same week, the money that I spent, because I learned how to do that really fast. And I already had customers, and they wanted to know this new extension technique, and I did it. I kicked butt. I got so busy with that. Everybody was coming to me. People were flying from all over the country for me to do their Invisible Strands hair extensions, because I learned how to use the internet. By that time, the internet was full bloom, and I learned the algorithms that they had at that time, and my name would pop up all over the place as doing hair extensions, and I had pictures